Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, your new album is your highest debut of your entire career on the Billboard charts.
I heard that. I
It's
heard
72.
that.
How does it feel to have such a high charting album at this stage in your career?
Absolutely wonderful.
When Aretha Franklin died, her family discovered 3 handwritten wills hidden in her home. But the biggest shock wasn't the money or the mansion. It was a secret about her 2 oldest sons that she had kept buried for 60 years. The truth was written in her own handwriting, and it changed everything they thought they knew. Her family had been living with lies, and now they're finally ready to tell the world what really happened. Aretha Louise Franklin was born on March 25, 1942, at 406 Lucy Avenue in Memphis, Tennessee. She was delivered right at her family's home. Her father, Clarence LaVaughn Franklin, was already becoming one of the most powerful Baptist ministers in the country. People called him the man with the $1 million voice because his sermons were so moving that he was paid thousands of dollars for appearances across America. Her mother, Barbara Siggers Franklin, was a gifted gospel singer and pianist. Mahalia Jackson herself once said Barbara was one of the finest gospel singers in the country. When Aretha was 2, the family moved to Buffalo, New York. By the time she was 5, they had settled in Detroit, where her father became pastor of the famous New Bethel Baptist Church. Their home soon filled with visitors like Martin Luther King Jr., Jackie Wilson, Sam Cooke, Clara Ward, James Cleveland, and Mahalia Jackson. To outsiders, the Franklin family seemed blessed, but behind the doors, cracks were already forming in young Aretha's world. In 1948, when Aretha was just 6 years old, her parents' marriage collapsed. Barbara left Detroit because she could no longer live with her husband's repeated affairs. She took her son Vaughn with her back to Buffalo, leaving behind her 4 other children. To many people, it looked like she had abandoned them, but the truth was different. Barbara stayed in touch, often visiting Detroit and bringing the children to Buffalo during summer vacation. She worked at a music store, gave lessons, and trained as a nurse's aide. The marriage was never officially ended, leaving the family in an uncertain limbo. Then came the most devastating blow. On March 7, 1952, just weeks before Aretha's 10th birthday, Barbara died of a massive heart attack at only 34 years old. The loss left 9-year-old Aretha without her mother, shattered and vulnerable. She leaned on her grandmother Rachel and gospel legend Mahalia Jackson, who helped raise her. That wound of early loss stayed with Aretha forever, shaping the emotion in her music that touched millions. Life inside the Franklin home was far more complicated than outsiders ever guessed. Behind her father's powerful pulpit voice were disturbing stories that painted a darker picture. The most shocking claim came from Memphis in 1940, 2 years before Aretha was born, when C.L. Franklin allegedly impregnated a 12-year-old congregant named Mildred Jennings, who later gave birth to a daughter, Carol Ellen Kelly. Over the years, others described the church environment as chaotic and scandalous. Ray Charles, who spent time at the Franklin home, said it felt like a circus where orgies were common, and added that Franklin was with both men and women. In David Ritz's biography, Charles recalled being stunned by how loose and open everything was. There were also whispers that Franklin was tied to the Detroit drug trade and even arranged for young girls from his congregation to be with older men. The rumors only grew stronger when, in 1979, C.L. Franklin was shot twice at point-blank range in what was called a robbery attempt. Many suspected it was connected to his secret dealing. For Aretha, growing up in that house meant being surrounded by both gospel greatness and unsettling corruption. In the middle of that chaos, the church itself became Aretha's safe place. It was where her extraordinary gift for music first stunned everyone around her. Smokey Robinson remembered hearing her sing at age 4. By 7, she was already playing complex chords on the piano by ear, without a single formal lesson. During services, her father would stand her on a chair so the whole congregation could see the small girl with the giant voice. At just 10 years old, shortly after her mother's death, Aretha sang her first solo at New Bethel with the hymn, "Jesus, Be a Fence Around Me." At 12, her father began taking her on his gospel caravan tours across the country. By 14, JVB Records released her first single, "Never Grow Old," with "You Grow Closer" on the other side. Despite the darkness in her home, the church which gave Aretha both her training and her chance to rise. But there was also a secret that Aretha carried for most of her life. At just 12 years old, she became pregnant and gave birth to her first son, Clarence, in 1955. She named him after her father. For more than 60 years, the identity of Clarence's father was kept hidden. Many suspected it was C.L. Franklin, but her brother Cecil later said it was just a boy from her school. Others pointed to Edward Jordan Sr., who Aretha would later describe in her will as a player. Some accounts suggested she had been assaulted at one of her father's parties, leaving her withdrawn and silent. At 14, she became pregnant again and gave birth to her second son, Edward, named after Edward Jordan Sr. In her own memoir, she downplayed these painful years, calling them not a big deal, but the truth was far more complicated. Her first album was recorded in 1956, when she was 14, right inside New Bethel Baptist Church. 9 tracks were captured live, with no studio tricks, later released as Songs of Faith. Producer Jerry Wexler described her teenage voice as not that of a child, but of someone with otherworldly power. During Precious Lord, a voice from the audience can be heard calling, "Listen at her!" She was already a mother of 2, yet her voice sounded both weary and mystical, carrying emotions far beyond her years. During these years, she grew close to Sam Cooke, who was 23 when he met her at the Franklin home. He had just begun moving from gospel into pop music, and his example showed Aretha what might be possible. Some even say Cooke wrote "You Send Me" for her. Quincy Jones remembered Dinah Washington calling Aretha the next one when she was still a child. By 18, Aretha told her father she wanted to follow Cooke's path. He agreed, and in 1960 she moved to New York City to chase her dream. Her father helped her prepare a 2-song demo that reached Columbia Records. At the same time, Berry Gordy wanted her and her sister Irma for his new Tamla label, and Sam Cooke tried to bring her to RCA Victor, but her father turned Gordy down, saying Tamla was too new, and Aretha chose Columbia. She signed as what was called a 5% artist, showing the label didn't yet see her as a sure thing. She was coached by choreographer Charlie Atkins to improve her stage presence, and in September 1960, her first Columbia single, "Today I Sing the Blues," reached the top 10 on the R&B chart. Aretha Franklin's first secular album was released in January 1961 under the title Aretha, with the Ray Bryant combo. She was only 18 years old, a gospel prodigy stepping into a world far different from the music that came naturally to her. The record was a strange mix of standard jazz, blues, and doo-wop, leaving many people unsure of what type of artist she was meant to be. One moment she was singing the fiery rhythm and blues track "Won't Be Long," and the next she was covering "Over the Rainbow." The sudden shifts between styles felt disjointed and confusing, almost as if the label itself had no idea who Aretha truly was. Columbia Records had placed her in the hands of executives who tried to fit her into every possible box without realizing the one she belonged in. Critics described the album as having a random vibe, and many later saw it as a warning sign of the struggles that would follow her during her Columbia years. Instead of letting her voice soar through the gospel soul foundation that defined her, Columbia forced her into songs that felt alien, setting her up for a long period of frustration. That same year, something unexpected happened. Aretha recorded "Rockabye Your Baby" with a Dixie melody, a song first written in 1918 by Gene Schwartz, with lyrics by Sam M. Lewis and Joe Young. It had already been a #1 hit for Al Jolson in 1918 and had brought Jerry Lewis a top 10 gold record in 1956. When Aretha released her version in 1961, it climbed to number 37 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 24 in Cashbox, also reaching the top 40 in both Australia and Canada. It became her first international hit. Downbeat magazine named her New Star Female Vocalist before the year ended, yet the irony was hard to ignore. Her breakthrough came not from her natural gospel or blues roots, but from a decades-old Tin Pan Alley standard that required her to hold back the very style that made her unique. The hit only convinced Columbia to keep pushing her further into jazz pop material, a direction that did not reflect her true power. Behind this confusion was Columbia's deep misunderstanding of Aretha. John Hammond, the legendary scout who had discovered Billie Holiday and Count Basie, signed her in 1960 as a 5% artist, the lowest tier in the industry. He envisioned her as a jazz star, overlooking her gospel foundation entirely. The label paired her with producers Clyde Otis and Robert Mersey, both known for working with Andy Williams and Barbra Streisand, whose styles were the complete opposite of Aretha's natural voice. Instead of treating her as an artist, Columbia treated her like a star starlet, handing her Broadway ballads, teen rhythm and blues numbers, and pop standards. In a painful twist, Berry Gordy had once tried to sign Aretha and her sister Irma to his Tamla label, which later became Motown. Her father turned the offer down because he thought Tamla was too small at the time. While Aretha was being stifled at Columbia, her friends in Detroit at Motown were enjoying one hit after another. Even in the middle of Columbia's missteps, Aretha's true talent still managed to break through in flashes. Her single, Won't Be Long, became her first to reach the Billboard Hot 100 and climbed to number 7 on the R&B chart in January 1961. The song opened her debut album with raw R&B energy, hinting at the artist she was meant to be. Another track, Operation Heartbreak, released as the B-side to Rockabye Your Baby, also found success on the R&B charts. Both songs carried the gospel soul DNA that later defined her Atlantic years, but Columbia never recognized what they had. Critics could hear her power, but the label kept steering her towards safer material, ignoring the gold mines sitting in their catalog. Between 1961 and 1966, Aretha released 10 albums under Columbia, yet only managed a single top 40 hit in those 5 years. When her contract ended in November 1966, she actually owed the label money because sales had been so poor. The frustration was crushing. She was exasperated with a company that did not understand her, trapped while watching her Motown peers thrive. Producers came and went, none of them understanding the soul music that was pouring out of her. By the end of 1966, she was 28 years old, carrying the voice of a goddess, but already being written off as a has-been. Everything changed when Jerry Wexler of Atlantic Records signed her in November 1966. At the time, Aretha was considered a commercial failure, yet Wexler saw what Columbia had missed. He had coined the very term rhythm and blues years earlier as a writer for Billboard. Instead of forcing her into a mold, Wexler brought her to Fame Studios in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, and let her shape her own sound with the Muscle Shoals rhythm section. The result was immediate. In January 1967, she recorded I Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You. Released in February, the song soared to number 1 on the R&B chart and number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100. The album of the same name eventually sold nearly 2 million copies and was certified gold, transforming Aretha almost overnight. Later that year, she recorded Otis Redding's Respect and reimagined it into an anthem for both feminism and the civil rights movement. While Redding had sung it as a demand from a man to a woman, Aretha turned it into a call for women and for African Americans to be treated with dignity. The song spent 4 weeks at number 1 on the R&B chart and reached number 2 on the pop chart. Its spelling breakdown, R-E-S-P-E-C-T, and its call and response sections became iconic. The song's cultural impact was massive, and Aretha's personal connection to the civil rights movement made it even more powerful. She had toured with Martin Luther King Jr. when she was just 16 and sang at his funeral years later. Activist Jesse Jackson later revealed that she had helped fund many civil rights tours and campaigns, often performing for free to support the movement. The year 1967 was the breakthrough she had been waiting for. After Respect, she released You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman and Chain of Fools. The latter had been written by Don Covey for Otis Redding, but Wexler gave it to Aretha, and it became another number 1 R&B hit, peaking at number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and holding the R&B top spot for 4 weeks. Together, these hits cemented her as the Queen of Soul. Over her career, she would chart 112 singles, including 20 number 1 R&B hits, more than any other female artist in history. From 1968 to 1975, she dominated the Grammy Awards, winning Best Female R&B Vocal Performance 8 years in a row. The streak included Respect in 1968, Chain of Fools in 1969, Share Your Love With Me in 1970, Don't Play That Song in 1971, Bridge Over Troubled Water in 1972, Young, Gifted, and Black in 1973, Master of Eyes in 1974, and Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing in 1975. During this time, she also won in other categories, including Best Soul Gospel Performance for Amazing Grace in 1973. In total, she would go on to win 18 Grammys from 44 nominations. Her dominance led to her being the first woman inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1987, and the youngest person to receive the Kennedy Center honors in 1994. Her voice also carried her into moments of profound national meaning. On April 9, 1968, just 5 days after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., she sang Precious Lord, Take My Hand at his funeral in Atlanta. The performance performance reached millions through a live television broadcast, offering comfort to a grieving nation. Beyond performances, she used her wealth and fame to directly support the civil rights movement, funding organizations, and even offering in 1970 to post $250,000 bail for Angela Davis. Her activism came at great personal risk, as the FBI had been monitoring her since 1967 through COINTELPRO. Still, she never wavered. In January 1972, she recorded Amazing Grace live at the New Temple Missionary Baptist Church in Los Angeles with Reverend James Cleveland and the Southern California Community Choir. The album sold over 2 million copies in the United States and became the highest-selling live gospel album in history. The sessions were so emotional that Aretha broke down in tears during rehearsals. The recording was filmed by Warner Brothers and later released as the acclaimed documentary Amazing Grace in 2018. Her success spread worldwide in the early 1970s. At the Juan Lespin Jazz Festival in France on July 21, 1970, she performed an 11-song set that included Satisfaction, Respect, Eleanor Rigby, and Spirit in the Dark. She also triumphed at San Francisco's Fillmore West before counterculture audiences, proving her ability to bridge racial and generational divides. These international tours turned her into a global icon and ambassador of both soul music and civil rights. By 1975, Aretha Franklin faced a challenge she had never experienced before. The disco craze was sweeping across America, changing the music scene that soul had ruled for years. Donna Summer exploded in popularity with songs like Love to Love You Baby, a track that ran almost 17 minutes and climbed to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 for 2 weeks in 1976. Younger audiences were drawn to the energy and sensuality of disco, and singers like Chaka Khan began to take the spotlight. Clubs such as Studio 54, which opened in early 1977, became cultural landmarks where crowds pressed against barricades just for the chance to get inside. Disco was more than music. It was a movement about escape and freedom, very different from the civil rights themes that had shaped Franklin's earlier work. For the Queen of Soul, it was the beginning of a fight to stay relevant. The late 1970s brought a painful series of disappointments. While Franklin still earned success on the R&B charts with songs like Until You Come Back to Me and I'm in Love, her albums no longer sold the way they once had. Trouble began during the recording of Hey Now Hey, produced by Quincy Jones. Although the single Angel found some success, the album failed badly when it came out in 1973. Things grew worse with her next records, Sweet Passion in 1977, Almighty Fire in 1978, and La Diva in 1979 all flopped. The 1978 release Diva, which tried to capture the disco sound, fell flat and ended up being her last recording for Atlantic. For someone who had once ruled the charts in both pop and R&B, this decline was shocking. The albums revealed the struggle she faced trying to blend her gospel soul style with the new disco sound. By the end of the decade, it was clear that her long partnership with Atlantic was coming to an end. In 1979, Franklin made the painful choice to leave Atlantic Records after 12 years. This was the label that had turned her from a struggling artist into the Queen of Soul. The relationship began back in November 1966, when producer Jerry Wexler brought her over from Columbia. At Atlantic, she created some of her greatest hits, including Respect, which reached number 1 on both the R&B and pop charts in April 1967. The label encouraged her to choose her own songs and accompany herself on piano, giving her music its authentic power. But by 1979, she owed the company money because sales had fallen short. The failures of her last albums made it impossible to continue. At 37 years old, she had to start over after leaving behind a partnership that had given the world classics like A Natural Woman, I Never Loved a Man, and Chain of Fools. In 1980, Franklin signed with Clive Davis at Arista Records. Davis, known for reviving careers, believed strongly in her potential. Their partnership started paying off right away. Her first Arista album, Aretha, released in 1980, included the R&B hit United Together and a Grammy-nominated cover of I Can't Turn You Loose. In 1981, Love All the Hurt Away featured a duet with George Benson and a Grammy-winning cover of Hold On, I'm Comin'. But the real breakthrough came in 1982 with Jump to It. Produced by Luther Vandross, the album went gold on February 1, 1983, her first gold record in 7 years. The title track held the number 1 spot on the Billboard Hot Soul Singles chart for 4 straight weeks and reached number 24 on the Hot 100, her biggest pop hit since 1974. Franklin called it one of her personal favorites, praising its groove as extra mellow. The album gave her a record-setting 10th #1 R&B album and proved that she still had her crown. Her career soared even higher in 1985 with the release of Who's Zoomin' Who, produced by Narada Michael Walden. The album brought her fully into the MTV era. It included collaborations with artists like the Eurythmics and Clarence Clemons, and it became her highest-charting album since 1972's Young, Gifted, and Black. The record also became her only platinum-certified album. MTV played her videos for Freeway of Love, Sisters Are Doing It for Themselves, and Another Night constantly, making her a star for a younger audience. Freeway of Love, released June 5, 1985, became her biggest single in 12 years. It climbed to number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 and held the number 1 spot on the Black Singles Chart for 5 weeks between July 27th and August 24. The song earned her a Grammy, and its Detroit-themed video became one of the year's most popular. The pink Cadillac featured in the video became so iconic that more than 100 of them appeared in her funeral procession in 2018. 2 years later, she reached new heights with George Michael in the duet I Knew You Were Waiting for Me. Released in 1987, it became a #1 hit in both the United States and the United Kingdom, marking her first and only UK #1. It topped charts in Australia, Belgium, Denmark, and Ireland, and broke into the top 10 in many other countries. The song earned them a Grammy, and later was named her biggest Hot 100 single of all time. Aretha Franklin's romantic life was full of struggles. At just 19 years old in 1961, she married Ted White. He was known in Detroit's club scene as a smooth operator, and producer Harvey Fuqua once described him as a straight-up him. Their marriage quickly turned into a nightmare, with public humiliation and private abuse. A 1968 Time magazine cover story reported that Ted White roughed her up in public, and many witnesses compared their relationship to Ike and Tina Turner. The impact on Aretha was devastating. She began drinking heavily, and in May 1967 in Columbus, Georgia, she fell off stage and broke her arm. At first, the incident was blamed on stage lights, but later it became known that alcohol played a role as she tried to numb the pain of her failing marriage. Record producer Clyde Otis recalled that their final studio sessions were bizarre, with Franklin missing performances and becoming increasingly isolated. The two divorced in 1969. After that, she had a healthier relationship with her manager Ken Cunningham, who helped her quit drinking and supported her growth as an artist. Still, the trauma from White left her with lasting trust issues that made it hard to form stable partnerships for the rest of her life. Her family life had been shaped by trauma long before that. When she was 6 years old in 1948, her mother Barbara left the family and moved to Buffalo. The split came amid rumors of C.L. Franklin's infidelity. Losing her mother left young Aretha devastated. 4 years later, Barbara died, leaving her motherless during her most important years. The struggles continued when Aretha gave birth to her first child at 12 and her second at 14. She never revealed the fathers, and the secrecy lasted throughout her life. Her father, C.L. Franklin, had his own reputation for inappropriate relationships with underage parishioners, so there was little judgment from him. Aretha's 4 sons, Clarence, Edward, Teddy, and Kakaf, grew up under the weight of family secrets while trying to live with a mother whose fame demanded her constant attention. The Franklin household was filled with tension. Her sister Irma once said, "The family was always careful not to incite their father's wrath, a sign of the fear that hung over them." Money added another layer of difficulty. Over her career, Aretha earned about $80 million, but when she died in 2018, her estate was worth only about $18 million. The reason was a lifetime of poor financial management and impulsive spending. She often gave money away to family, friends, and causes without thinking about the future, even though she had access to professional advisors. At her death, she owed $7.8 million in taxes to the IRS. The debt tied up her estate for years. Her heirs could not access their inheritance until July 2022, when a settlement required that 45% of the estate's quarterly income go toward paying off the balance. Franklin's generous spirit often left her in financial trouble. When big expenses came up, like paying for her father's medical care during his 5-year coma or settling unexpected tax bills, she would go back on tour to earn quick money. This cycle followed her throughout her life. When she died, she had not left behind a formal will or trust, leaving her special needs son without the protection actions that could have kept his inheritance safe. Her health struggles were hidden from the public for years. She was first diagnosed with pancreatic neuroendocrine cancer in December 2010 and underwent surgery, but she kept it secret almost until the end. This type of cancer is rare, accounting for only 6% of all pancreatic tumors. Even close friends and associates did not know how serious her illness was until just before her death. On the Monday before she passed away, sources told the Associated Press that she was seriously ill and that her death was imminent. On August 16, 2018, at 9:50 in the morning, she died at her Detroit home, surrounded by family and friends. She had entered hospice care only days earlier. The timing was especially tragic, given that pancreatic cancer has the lowest 5-year survival rate of any major cancer at just 9%. The risk is also higher for African Americans, who face a 28 to 59% higher incidence than other groups. At the time of her death, her family believed she had left no will. She was 76, and her estate, worth an estimated $80 million, was expected to be divided equally among her 4 sons under Michigan law. The estate included about $6 million in real estate, cash, gold records, furs, and valuable music copyrights. For 9 months, her niece Sabrina Owens served as the estate's executor, managing properties such as a $1.1 million Bloomfield Hills mansion and a Detroit home worth $300,000. Given Aretha's private nature, the family thought it made sense that she had never prepared legal documents for her fortune. That belief changed in May 2019 when Sabrina Owens discovered a 4-page handwritten will hidden under the cushions of Aretha's living room couch. The will, dated 2014, was written entirely in her handwriting. Instead of a standard signature, she had drawn a smiley face inside the letter A of her name, which was still considered legally valid. The will gave her Bloomfield Hills home to her son, Hekauf, and her grandchildren. The discovery stunned the family, especially since it was found in the same spot where she often sorted through important papers. The case grew more complicated when investigators found 3 handwritten wills. The 2 most important were from 2010 and 2014. The 2010 will had been locked away in a cabinet and notarized, which made it look more official, while the 2014 couch will appeared less formal. The differences were huge. The 2010 will required Hekauf and Edward to complete business classes, get certificates, or earn degrees before inheriting, while the 2014 version had no such rules. The later will gave Hekauf the Bloomfield Hills mansion, while the earlier one did not mention specific real estate. This turned into a 5-year legal battle that cost the family heavily in attorney fees. Probate disputes of this kind often add about $17,000 in legal costs, but Franklin's case likely cost far more because of its complexity. The fight split her sons, with Hekauf and Edward supporting the 2014 will, while their brother Ted White II pushed for the 2010 version. The most shocking revelation came when the 2010 will revealed that Clarence and Edward, her 2 oldest sons, shared the same father. For years, it had been reported that Clarence's father was a school friend named Donald Burke, but the will stated clearly that both Clarence, born in 1955 when Franklin was 12, and Edward, born in 1957 when she was 14, were fathered by Edward Jordan. Senior Franklin's words showed her deep bitterness toward him. On page 6, she wrote that Jordan should never receive or handle any money or property belonging to Clarence, underlining the word never twice. She stressed that he had never contributed to Clarence's welfare, future, or past. This revelation exposed the painful truth about her early life and brought to light secrets she had kept for more than 60 years.